Hello and welcome for real this time to Still Digging, your only glitch-filled live bi-weekly archaeology show on the YouTube. Citations needed. We're really on this time. I double-checked before we went. I went on. I will get Sarah's picture up in a second. But you know, one catastrophe at a time. So, let me go ahead, and this is why we have a script, and I believe this is exactly what I said last show, when we had these problems. So, hello, and welcome to Still Digging, a show where a panel of archaeologists discuss the world of archaeology, presented by the ArchaeoRPG Collective. I'm your host, Bill, and the panel includes Amma, Sarah, and Tom. Today, we're going to talk about the Society of American Archaeology's draft sexual and anti-harassment policies and procedures, an article about an archaeologist in Alaska. We are going to read a book review of a book that none of us here have read. And finally, we wish to remember the archaeologist Theresa O'Mahony, who passed away this week. So with that, let's dig in. So, earlier this week, the Society of American Archaeology published a draft amendment to their bylaws concerning sexual and anti-harassment policies and procedures at events, at SAA events, the Society of American Archaeology, SAA for short. This was prompted by incidents which occurred earlier this year at the annual meeting of the Society of American Archaeology in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where a disciplined, a professor who was disciplined for harassment, disciplined for harassment, sorry about that, I was distracted there for a second, by his professor, by his school, and his state Archaeological Association, was allowed to attend the annual meeting of what is the largest professional organization for archaeologists in North America. So this gentleman appeared, and unfortunately, a number of survivors, not unfortunately, the number of survivors were there to present their work and to conduct their business, and were both upset and, in some cases, felt re-victimized by the presence of this individual there at this conference. They brought their concerns up with the Society of American Archaeology, who at that time during the meeting, at least according to those who were the survivors of this, did not satisfactorily meet their needs. An ally of the survivors took it upon themselves to try to escort this individual off-site. And unfortunately, because of sort of taking a matter into their own hands, that person was subsequently asked to leave the conference. So it became a kerfuffle. I was not there at the conference, but I was monitoring the conference on Twitter, and I could see it actively brewing up as things goes on. So that, with all that, there became a movement of not just the survivors, but those who are watching this action, because we live in a modern social media age. You cannot act without a bunch of eyes watching you, even if you're not aware of it. And there were a number of archaeologists, enough number of archaeologists, to force this sort of a change to the bylaws of the organization, who were not pleased with the way this was being handled. So, I'm skipping over a lot of stuff because we're not here to really, at this point, relitigate the entire thing. We're here to sort of talk about what the end result, what the current result is right now, and that is this draft memorandum, which is to, one, address a specific, or prompted by a specific act, but also in general to help protect all members from sexual and harassment. Their languaging is It's sort of what I always found weird. I know it's part of that whole legalese thing, physical and sexual harassment, but it also would include verbal harassment of like bullying and things like that. But basically, it's an overall harassment policy, which includes sexual harassment. Is at least the layman's way I would put something like that. So, I was reading it over, and if you guys don't mind, I get to talk about some of my observations first, or if you guys want to talk about your summaries of it, and I'll jump back in.
Oh, fine. You can go first.
I am giving options here. I've been talking a lot, like 4 whole minutes or so. So, but okay, I keep talking. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I mean, you've got the recap of it pretty good. I think the thing I keep repeating is I'm just amazed at how badly the SAA handled this whole situation, like continuously making the wrong decision when it came to addressing this publicly, and then I'm sorry, they just did a terrible job of it, and they appear to continually be doing a bad job of it. I have several acquaintances who are working with them to help. Well, the article that came out is about the group there, and I know several of the individuals on the group, and I think they're doing a fantastic job. I mean, I'm not personally involved with it, but it's interesting to me that this was the year that the SAA released their newest policies on sexual harassment in general. Like, that was kind of front and center of the SAA book that they handed out this year, and they just kind of like that was the big thing. Oh, we've got this new policy, blah blah blah, and they just fell flat on their faces when it came time to actually do anything in the policy that they had just released this year. And now they have a group of people who are helping them write another one, and I mean, I don't understand what they think they're going to accomplish here. I mean, I know you were saying that this is specifically for the conferences, but I just assumed that's also what the sexual harassment policy that they put in the books was supposed to be for. So apparently I'm naive. I don't know.
No, you bring up a good point. It's like, what differentiates this from the general? Reading this thing over, it looks like, unfortunately, a lot of corporate types of sexual harassment policies, which first and foremost are there to protect the corporate entity, and secondarily are there to protect potential victims and or survivors of harassment in this.
Well, and you made a point earlier when we were kind of warming up for this that it still puts the onus of bringing it to the SAA's attention on their survivors and the victims. It doesn't make the SAA proactive.
Right.
And this particular incident, I know that there were several times where the SAA tried to push aside their responsibility by saying, oh, nobody told us. And then when it was proven that they had been told several times, they were like, well, the state and the university that this individual was from, they didn't tell us. And it was like, yeah, it was kind of incredibly public. And I guess the college, it was either the college or the state association actually did reach out to the SAAs and was like, hey, by the way. So I don't know, it's just being very badly handled, and I really don't understand why basically rewriting this and rewording it is going to make any difference. I personally, myself, do not feel threatened when I go to conferences, but that's because I am secure in my ability to like break the hand of anyone who touches me inappropriately. But I'm not everyone, and I shouldn't even have to have that thought while I'm at a professional conference with my peers going over my field and, doing research. It's just ridiculous. I shouldn't have to worry about my physical safety while I'm there.
No, you shouldn't. And I'm going to go ahead and read some of the items from the draft. But before I do that, I want to make sure it's clear that right now this is a draft. This is not the final say so, and this is now subject to review and comment. So if you are a member of SAA, you are absolutely, I would encourage you, strongly encourage you, to read this over. It'll be in the show notes when the show goes separately from, it'll be in the show notes later, that you read this over and you do make comments to organizations. There's still time to have your voice heard and to have your say on this. As they mentioned at the beginning and also at the end of this thing, this is a draft. It's a draft that has not been fully reviewed by their attorneys at this point. So nothing that I'm going to quote in here is actually the policy. So I want to make sure that's fully clear, that, you know, this is just what's being proposed right now, and everything I'm going to be talking about from this report or this draft is subject to change. So
I just posted the link in the chat also.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Interested in reading it yourself.
Thank you. But it will also be in the show notes eventually. So under the code of conduct, it does mention or currently proposes that any SAA member who is required by their employer or by a legal process to refrain from certain behaviors or from contact with certain individuals must respect those requirements while participating in all SAA activities. That is definitely one of under the category of personal conduct. It's not something being enforced by anyone else. You are on the honor system, I am supposing, for that line at least, on here. In terms of disclosures and accommodations, and they do make a difference in here. They do separate between the idea of disclosure and reporting, where disclosure is just informing the organization that you have a concern of an individual on site. You don't actually have to, you can leave it anonymous. According to this proposal, you can stay anonymous. The other person doesn't have to be involved. You're just sort of informing the organization, so the organization's made aware of the situation in case something happens, where reporting is actually something has occurred and you wish to report something formally on this. So when I say disclosure and that, I'm getting way too deep into legalese. I didn't want to get this deep into that. Anyway, under disclosures and accommodations, a survivor safety is at an SAA activity may be compromised by an incident of misconduct that occurred within or outside SAA jurisdiction at any time or place. In particular, the presence of a perpetrator or alleged perpetrator of misconduct may affect a member's safety. The process of disclosing and accommodation prioritizes the safety of the survivor without the need for an investigation by SAA. So at least that way, then they're sort of cutting through the red tape, which was something that did occur in April, that they had to do an investigation. Of course, by the time everything's done, the conference is almost over.
They didn't need to do a freaking investigation. No, they did not. He wasn't alleged. He is convicted. But anyway.
I'm just reading this thing. This is the outside observer's point of view. And someone has to play devil's advocate. Go ahead, Tom.
Devil's advocate on this.
No, they were wrong, and they are wrong, and they continue to kind of be wrong. Go ahead, Tom.
I do want to clear up one thing. I don't know if we have sorry. This is applicable to all SAA sponsored activities. So I don't know if that includes like day-to-day work at SAA or not, but I guess this does. It is any activity sponsored by the SAA.
Events sponsored by SAA. So this would be the annual conference.
Activities. I don't know what that means.
So I don't think this replaces their own individual workplace. That would be a separate policy, I'm sure, is their own workplace. So,
and there's another one. The one thing that I actually find a little bit ambiguous on this one, and besides the use of the word reasonable, which that's a personal pet peeve of mine, but right. They just say report to SAA. It doesn't give you a person to report any of this to, or a
later on they do
report it.
To be fair to them, later on they do talk about the safety officers And
Okay.
there should
So
be
they do have it.
at least 2 safety officers at every event. So
Okay.
they do
So there
spell
should
that
be
out
somebody
later.
Okay, so there is someone that should be easily identifiable and
Yes.
Okay, hang on.
supposed to be.
To build on what Tom is saying here, at least 2. There were how many people in Albuquerque at the conference this year?
Right,
Well,
but
it's just someone to report to. Is
Right,
what the
but-
safety
Right, but you're gonna make 2 people. I don't know. Are those people gonna be anyway? I'm nitpicking. I guess I'll stop.
no. I mean, I would consider it the same way as like a safety person on a project, even if it's a huge construction project. You kind of don't want to have too many because you want to have that point person who's going to be your responsible party. You need you need to have a responsible party, and I think 2 is a compromise. Now that's definitely on there. We could definitely say like something like maybe a sort of online learning thing. Maybe 1 person monitoring's fine. Maybe a cocktail dinner, 1 person's fine. Maybe a huge conference with 4,000 people. Maybe 3 or 4 might be kind of cool.
Yeah, maybe 1 per 1,000 would be
One
reasonable.
main with 3
the duties
deputies
of the officer will be though.
to be trained.
I'm sorry, I derailed us.
To be trained, and
think-
trained is sort of ambiguous still. Like I said, this is a policy, so it's the initial.
It's draft.
It's draft, and it's
so-
also this is the high level stuff. They're not going to go in. That's why they have the ambiguous language, so they can come in later and do
Right.
things afterwards.
Bill is our lawyer.
I'm
He speaks
reading-
legalese.
I used to work at a bank, so I'm used to reading contracts.
That's fine. Somebody needs to be able to translate this shit.
I have to read this stuff all the time now too.
That's fine.
Yeah, when you're doing like bidding and stuff like that, this kind of BS legalese, and that's why I said first and foremost, this is a document for the SAA, and so that should not, But then again, that's also like anyone's the companies, company they work for, their policy, it's for the company first.
Mm-hmm. No, that's what policy. That's all policies are ever built for.
Yeah.
So it sounds like.
Jury note.
At least it is at least setting up a system for on-site reporting and a well-explained procedure for what is supposed to happen, as opposed to. I honestly I don't know what the policy looked like before. So, and I'm not an SAA member right now. So,
well, for my, I mean,
if I had my manual with me, I could tell you, but I don't. It's all at my house.
My reading from 2,000 miles away is that there wasn't, and they were kind of making it up as they went along. At least that's how it looked.
No, they did have a
That's how it
policy.
came
That was the
across.
That's how
thing.
it came across. I mean, they might have had a policy written down, but the way they executed it,
Yeah.
once
Oh,
again,
yeah.
and this is definitely, if anyone's from the SAA is watching, I want to speak to you right now directly. We are critical here. I am critical here because I think this is a valuable organization, and it's an important organization. It needs to do the right thing. But I also want to remind this, like any organization, people are watching you. It's not just the people at the conference. It is your paid members. It's not just your paid members. It's the unpaid members who are thinking about becoming members. So you all, especially at your annual conference, there are a lot of eyes on you, and you probably know this already. But there's a lot of expectation of a certain level of professionalism, even from the organization itself. And for me personally, I know I'm one of the ones who found their social media behavior immediately during the conference and immediately afterwards to be highly unprofessional. No, I'm trying to be in the, and there was definitely a lot of name calling going on, but as the SAA, I would expect you as an organization to have the higher ground, and you didn't do that. Now changes have been made, and I would say more recently there has been an attempt at better communication, but I would say there's still room for growth, and I would say continue to reach out to your members. Your members are not adversaries. Which is how this appeared to have occurred in the immediate aftermath of this event. that the membership was treated as an adversarial party to this, as opposed to a passionate party who wants nothing more than what is best for the SAA. So I know now I'm sidetracking us, but I just wanted to make sure that was out there. Then this is for me, and I just want to make sure that was out there for them.
Part of the issue they were having, though, was also they hired an outside PR firm at some point, and that went off the rails. And I have spoken to a couple people who are, you know, members or involved with some of the organization, but they don't. I don't think they're really quite sure what happened there either.
Yeah, I don't know.
But they are, as far as I can tell, they are trying to take steps to remedy all of this, and that is, at least it's steps in the right direction, is what it looks like. But
they are reaching out to and they have been reaching out to the membership since this time, since April. And I know that because, like I said, I know several of the people who are on this, the ASWAG
cool
committee.
Small group, or we're butchering you. You guys can yell at me at Archeo or at Archeo Thoughts. Yell at me for not getting your small group name right.
I'll send Stephanie after you.
I know. I'm sorry.
You're very polite attacking. She's Canadian.
I know.
But yeah, I mean, I know that they reached out. They were asking people. I myself got a couple letters that were just kind of like, "Hey, if we did this thing, would that make you happy?" And I was like, I'm just disappointed in general. I did not take anything personally, but in general, I was very disappointed with how the SAA handled the overall situation. And I don't know. I feel like I really feel like it's too little, too late. Honestly, I mean, I'm glad that they're trying, but I have also not heard or seen them kind of own it. And they're still trying to kind of pass it off on the membership. They're still trying to kind of, it was the PR person. Yeah, the PR person you hired. They
need to do a mea culpa and most likely an act of contrition. It can be symbolic. The act can be symbolic, but I would think an act of contrition, something to sort of show, not just because it's always not just say, but you got to show.
Yeah, I would honestly just be happy with them tweeting or putting out a blog post that was just like, "We fucked up. We recognize that we fucked up. We will do our best to not do it again." I would be very happy with that. Again, I was not personally affected by anything that happened at the SAAs this year, but I do have several people who are close to me that were, and the repercussions of this continue to affect people who are in my circle of acquaintances. It may not be affecting me directly, but it is affecting me indirectly through the people that I know. And frankly, I think it's bullshit. And I feel like if the SAA can't at least admit their part in this fully and be like, yeah, we screwed up, I think anything they do from that point forward isn't sincere.
So with that, I think it's been better than said now. But I see on the side here, I think Alma's trying to call in, and then we can actually talk about real archaeology in the field someplace. But before we leave this. Before we leave this, I want to remind everybody to follow the link to go to that article. And if you are a member of SAA, you have until October 7th to respond to this draft, to comment upon it. And I strongly encourage all members of SAA to do that because this is very important. This affects all membership with that. This is across the board thing. So with that, we're going to move on, and let's see if I can get Alma in here. There you are. Sorry about that. I know we were supposed to have you in earlier, but you tried to get in. But okay, now let's pivot. Now let's cool off a little bit by going to Alaska.
Ooh.
I hear it's not actually cold in Alaska anymore.
Points forever. Points forever.
Feels like a giant dad joke waiting to happen.
I hear that's in right now.
Apparently, yes.
All right, so somebody want to introduce this?
Do you want me to jump in, or?
Yeah, well, you seemed more familiar with what was going on, but
I wouldn't say I'm necessarily familiar. It came to my attention earlier, prior to it being released on Twitter. I have a professor within my department who also works in Alaska with Indigenous communities looking at subsistence activities and specifically revitalization through things called cultural camps. So it was kind of relevant to the work that he's done so far, and he's been participating on the archaeological dig that I was at in August, and so he's been doing a lot of crossover work into ethnography and archaeology and ways in which local communities can be brought in to talk about heritage and culture, and that's exactly what this article is about. So it was written by Alice Watterson, who is, according to her Twitter, archaeologist specializing in illustration, digital survey, and visualization. And through a dig through Aberdeen University in Scotland, working with the Yup'ik village in northern Alaska, and was really talking about the idea of cultural and heritage and developing different approaches through both, community involvement, but also through digital resources as well, too, which I thought that was, I think, the thing that really caught my interest, because I'm a very visual person, and I love to kind of come up with different ways of thinking, but also visualizing the past as well.
And this project looks really, really cool. I will say the 3D scans I think are pretty interesting, and the fact that they have, it looks like they've got, or in one of the photos they've got, it looks like some sort of interactive. I don't know if it's supposed to be an interactive exhibit or if it's a game or something that they've developed for this camp. But they have these 3D scans, so you can look at the object, and then it looks like there are either interviews or people saying the word in Yup'ik. But I do like it that we're moving towards the 3D scan like curation method. VCU has a pretty cool program that they're Dr. Bernard Means has been going all over the world and scanning all kinds of artifacts from all kinds of different collections. He's done a lot of work in Virginia, projects that my company has done. He has actually scanned some of the portions of the assemblage to create this kind of but make those 3D scans available. So if you want to have that artifact to teach with in your classroom or in a museum or whatever, you can get the 3D scan, the wireframe, and print it out yourself. So you have a teaching material.
Somebody's got opinions over there. That sounds actually like a really cool project. Although the interesting thing with this article is that there's that intersection with the Indigenous community and Indigenous archaeology, in which, I've seen counter articles that have talked about, one, for example, the idea of ownership of that imagery and who has, a say over whether or not these items are displayed or not, or made public. And I'm not sure if that came up. I read the article a while back, and so I don't remember that necessarily being involved. But if they had community members telling stories, I'm pretty sure that there was a certain level of community autonomy over the decision-making process and what information went up.
Yeah, I mean, from my read of the article, the local community is the one who initiated this archaeological project to begin with, and that the physical artifacts themselves were remaining within the community. They built a local museum for it rather than sending it someplace like Anchorage or to the lower 48s. They kept it local, and it was important to them because it was an interesting way of seeing sort of a physical reminder of when we talk a lot about the idea of the past is the present, that the purpose of archaeology is to say something about the people of today. And they were demonstrating this by the fact that they wanted to keep these artifacts close to them because it was their story. It was sort of a reaffirmation of their community and so forth. But to also see them sort of embrace this newer technology, these sort of 3D recreations of their ancestral villages and so forth like that, were also very interesting on there. I mean, I consider this article, we're going to put this article is featured in the conversation, theconversation.com. We also going to put this into the show notes so that you can also read this ahead of time there. It's not that long of an article, unfortunately. I mean, articles are articles, and they're always going to have to be, you know, cut for time and cut for space and so forth like that. So it will not be as deep as sort of an academic study will be. So I look at this as sort of like a good snapshot, a good window into this. But this is a longer term project, and I would say if you read the article and you're interested, definitely look more into this project. It sounds like they're putting some of their stuff online, so I would definitely encourage you to reach out online and sort of dig in deeper. I mean, the one thing with a magazine article is that it should always intellectually it should be an intellectual appetizer, and that if you wish to know more about it, you're going to have to go in for a meal, and that's some other place right there. So there are a pretty substantial amount of, well, not a substantial amount, but there are definitely a few links in here to additional information regarding this. And I wanted to add that this is kind of just a really good example of a community archaeology project where you're working with the community. You want to get your research questions from there and give them autonomy in the dissemination of that information, and also what happens to those artifacts or that assemblage once you're done digging. And the one that actually stuck with me, it's towards the bottom of the article. They're talking about they have a festival yearly, and there were kids coming into the museum during the festival to see the artifacts that they had just dug up from this old village site, which I believe is what the name of the what they called the site was, like Old Village. But just this sentence: big kids lifted little kids up to peer in the cabinets and gasp, asking, "These all came from down there, from our beach." And I think that from our beach part really is it kind of summarizes what the point of us doing projects like this is. It's connecting people to their past so they know, I mean, they have access to, right, and it's a new version of ancestral knowledge, I guess, is or just adding to it. It's like this other picture. Oh, sorry.
No, it's. Go ahead, you finish.
It's real quick. It's also, it reminded me of this other picture near the end of the article with this youngster who looks, maybe around 10, with the caption, "Volunteer Rufus holds up an ivory toggle he excavated from Nunolek." So it's a reminder that this was, this wasn't archaeologists coming in to tell this group who they were. And we're coming into it. Sounded like there was, at least from this article here, it gives the strong impression that there was deep community involvement in this, which is ideal.
I guess I just want to kind of draw attention to the language that we're using, though. And I don't think anybody's doing it intentionally or in a malicious way, but I feel like the language we use a lot of times when we're talking about these kind of situations still others the community that we're working with. They say ours and they say that kind of stuff, but we still come back to our research questions. And we use terms like, I don't know, there was something very specific, way back when you first started reading the article, that was said, and it just kind of triggered my mind about the whole we're sitting here and we're saying we're working with the community, and we are working with the community, and I think for the most part we do have their best interests in mind, but right there their best interests. It's not about what I think their best interests are.
Right.
It's, you know, the community, as Tom said, reached out and asked for people to come in and help them with this. They're already interested in this. We're not introducing anything new to them. They know about this. They want to know more about it. They want to see how it's going to help them. Right. And everything else is just kind of secondary to that. I mean, yeah, we're getting research out of it and we're getting valuable contacts out of it. But I think, you know, we talk about who owns what, and I think the first real way to be aware, to make ourselves aware of it, is to be aware of the language that we're using, because we are using very ownership heavy language. And we, the archaeologists, are taking that ownership on ourselves and making the indigenous groups secondary, even though they should be primary.
But I don't think. I mean,
me being a kill.
Yeah. So. But I think in some ways, I mean, there's always, at least there's going to be a we and an us in this, because at some point, you know, the mutuality will end, and there is the questions, concerns, priorities of the professional archaeologist, the academic archaeologists who have come into town, and there are the concerns of the local peoples, and they have different agendas, and that's just how it works. I mean, and this case is actually pretty. Well, then we're not even factoring in what the state might want to say on this. We're not even, you know. On a lot of projects, you know, when we talk about stakeholders, what we're talking about is that everybody has their own agenda, and it's trying to find some way of marrying all those agendas. So on some level, you have to, it's really hard to get away from the us and them, or the we and they type of stuff. But yes, no, too often and too long, it has been in the most patronizing manner possible. And that absolutely needs to be pulled back.
Yeah, I don't think we're being patronizing intentionally. It's not, I'm coming here to patronize you. That's not what's happening. But I do think that, and I know Tom keeps trying to jump in here, and I don't think we have a right to walk away from a situation like this. Like, yeah, you say there will come a point where our interests and their interests have to part, because we're we're archaeologists and they're the people. But I think in this kind of a situation, the people should trump anything the archaeologists are trying to do. If they come in and they're like, no, I don't like the research you're doing, then I think you just have to eat it. And I know people don't like that, but it's not your culture. You know, do you really have a right to run with it? But anyway, I think I'm also getting way off topic. Tom, go ahead, rescue me.
Oh. I just wanted to point out that I don't know if it is the case in this particular project. I'm having some trouble figuring out who actually initiated it and who you know, who's the lead, who's involved running the project. But I mean, we are also seeing more and more indigenous archaeologists working with their own communities to do these projects. So that othering factor is hopefully slowly starting to disappear. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but I think that line starting to disappear is a good direction for us as a field to be moving. And this is a conversation that I've had recently, and this is something that I kind of I wish we could do better in CRM even. But I mean, we work on these projects all the time that are on private land that may be attributable to a indigenous group that's local, and we don't have the time, we don't have the budget, we don't have the even the permissions to share any of this information with those groups sometimes. And I mean, it sucks.
Yeah.
I don't even have an excuse for it. It just sucks.
Yeah, because it completely cuts them out of the loop, and I don't like that either.
And I mean, at least in Virginia, there are now 7 federally recognized tribes, which is 7 more than 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Which was 0 before the Pamunkey got in, and then I'm not going to remember the rest of the tribe, all the rest of the tribes, but the Mattaponi, Upper Mattaponi, Rappahannock, Monacans, I'm forgetting one. Forgive me. Somebody jump in if you know.
I don't.
I'm leaving you out there. The Virginia crew is going to come after you hard now.
Yeah, sorry guys. I'm just bad at remembering things sometimes. Patawomic maybe? That sounds right.
Sure.
Anyway, if anybody is better at that, please jump in the chat or at me, whatever.
Always open for corrections.
Yeah, please. I'm not as bright as I come across, and I don't come across that bright. But those tribal governments are, they're forming their tribal historic preservation offices now, and they're starting to be able to work more with. Here it's DHR, but the State Historic Preservation Office and Army Corps of Engineers or whatever regulatory body is pushing for these projects to happen when they push for them to happen. So I think that's there's movement in the right direction, but we still have a long way to go.
Oh yeah.
All right, and I guess lastly, Amma, do you want to talk about any of the actual archaeology that might have been interesting?
Through this project?
Yeah, that might have caught your attention in this project.
Insofar, well, I mean, to be fair, my background is not in Alaskan archaeology, but if you're talking about some of the methodologies, I can certainly talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean,
sure.
any observations you might have, yeah.
Okay, I mean, one of the things that I found was really interesting was, again, the fact that, they're using video games, and it's not, while the article paints it as something that's potentially new, I do know of both through museum work as well as through a friend who did a PhD project on this, that this is not something new. It's not a new vehicle that Indigenous communities have been using as a way of managing culture and heritage through that. And there's a couple of really beautiful games out. I think there's one on Steam that was done by, I think it's a Canadian Indigenous group.
Never Alone, I believe is the name of that game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I think that was something that was maybe I would have loved to have seen kind of nodded to, or even, brought into the conversation about this, being a vehicle for these kinds of developments for community members. And I think it's an important one. And like the article talks about, is that this is not just about, reaching out to the community, but reaching out to the younger generations specifically through a medium that they respond to positively. And I think that's one of the real kind of highlights of gaming. And I mean, we talk about gaming on this podcast, and I think that was something that I wanted to bring around to as well, was just the fact that as a vehicle, gaming can be a really important tool for talking about,
archaeology,
heritage, culture, folklore.
Yeah, which
I don't know,
as
a able to play the game?
Oh yeah, I've played the game. It's absolutely beautiful. It's normally pretty cheap on Steam sales. I believe it's available like on phones and most of the consoles and on Steam, and it's everywhere. And if you get a chance to play it, play it. But that gaming one was a reminder. At the top of the hour, we'll be doing Ritual Roles and Roles recap. So
but that
go ahead,
the one thing I do want to point out just about the game that Amma brought up, the reward, you're, instead of getting like, you got this bad, blah blah blah, you unlock stories as you go through the game story. So it's actually Indigenous people telling these stories. Some of it is in their native language. I'm sorry, I can't remember which language it is. I want to say Inupiat, but I could be wrong.
The prize is to hear a story.
Yeah, and it's like in the native language or in the Indigenous language, and then it'll have English subtitles underneath, which I think is a nice touch.
Yeah. Different sorts of engagements are always good. And now there is no good transition at this point now. But before we end the show today, we do want to acknowledge the passing of someone very important to the archaeological community in the United Kingdom and sort of around the English language world, and that is Theresa O'Mahony. She was best known for her all-inclusive archaeology Twitter handle and her enabled archaeology foundation, where she was a champion, a true champion, on reaching out to working with disabled and those with abilities to make archaeology a continued reality. That one's physical or mental condition was not something that would stop someone from participating in the world of archaeology. Unfortunately, I never had a chance to actually meet her. For various reasons, I was actually beginning to look up her organization, was more likely soon was going to reach out with some questions, and unfortunately she passed this week. And it's a reminder of how time is sort of fickle in that manner. But I did notice, and the reason I wanted to put this on today is that she, watching my social media feeds across the board and seeing the absolute outpouring of love for this woman. She had touched so many people in the United Kingdom and around the world with her crusade of making archaeology as accessible as possible to as many people as possible. So I wanted to give a moment for us to acknowledge her and her passing. I think it would be remiss if we didn't do that. And if anybody wishes to make any sort of comments on that or any experiences they may have had with her or not, you're more than welcome to right now.
I know for me, I mean, she only recently kind of popped up on my radar, and I know we had a conversation one of our earlier episodes regarding enabled archaeology and making sites more accessible to people with different physical abilities. And I know we didn't really come to any kind of conclusion right now, but I think the conclusion that we reached was it is difficult, but I think we all agree that it was very much worthwhile trying to accommodate as many people as possible in whatever situation they got. I do believe that. And we should be working towards that in all of our endeavors.
I really only knew her through Twitter. We've had a few conversations. Everything was positive. I really liked how she raised my awareness to the fact that there are, people who want to be in the field who have difficulties navigating the terrain and stuff like that. And it's like, we can still get these people out into the field somehow. There's no reason not to. And I always really enjoy bringing the question that that Tom was talking about.
Same person.
You got like 5 minutes for that, all right? Or 3 minutes.
But I like to ask my crews those kind of questions, and we usually come to the same conclusion that it's like, well, we're not really sure how to do it exactly, but we're all pretty much in the consensus that it should at least be attempted. And I mean, right now on my crew that I'm working with right now, we have one individual who's effectively deaf and another individual who has to walk with a cane. And we're doing CRM. We're doing a phase 3 with CRM. And I mean, we don't have any problems with either of them, integrating them into the regular group. We just have to, make sure that we're talking face to face with the person who needs that. And, the guy who walks with a cane, we just, he just doesn't do certain things. It's just how it is, But because of Theresa, I'm more aware of those kind of things than I think I would have been before I was aware of her on Twitter, honestly. So I think she accomplished a goal truly there. And yeah, so I'm thankful that I got to at least know her on Twitter.
Okay, I'm going to jump in and going to try and see how I handle this. I knew Theresa personally. We both attended the same MA program at UCL the same year. She is possibly the person I was closest with throughout that year. And I guess if we want to talk about transitions between the last topic and now, I've been doing a lot of reminiscing because this was, what I'd like to say, a pretty hard loss for me. And I wrote down something and I kind of wanted to share it because it's timely and it really encapsulates, Theresa and my relationship. And that is that we literally met, I want to say 3 years to the day, because the program started right about now, because my birthday is in 2 days and I knew the program started on my birthday. But the participants all decided to meet up ahead of time and have a lunch on Gordon Square right outside the Institute of Archaeology. And I think we had talked about a couple of us having close birthdays, but nothing really came of it. She brought me a birthday card that day, and she gave it to me, and she said she was worried that because I was in a country, that wasn't home and far away, that she felt that I'd be feeling alone and far from home. And it was this small, telling gesture that, it immediately hinted at kind of the depth of her kindness for both friends and strangers. And I've seen that reiterated throughout a lot of the stories that people have been telling so far. And rather than it being, cheapening the experience, it further testifies to how much, the depth of her benevolence, I guess, is the right way to really say it. And I mean, my MA was so much more enriched, not only through the fact that she was a consummate advocate. It came out in the classroom. But I also helped her out. I worked as basically a free aide. I think maybe she forced some money upon me, but I helped her with her research. I learned about the different approaches to disabilities, social models versus medical models. And we would sit down over coffee and talk about the things that she'd been through and the things that she wanted to do. And even though she was learning and working, she was constantly educating others. And it wasn't just through her own experiences, but it was this compassion for other people, both, visible and invisible disabilities. And to kind of bounce off of what Serra said, sometimes it's not only just about incorporating and welcoming and including people, it's acknowledging that there's people already out there in the field that have that. And sometimes archaeology is this physical, push yourself to the limit kind of work. And I think that's something that's been built into it, but it doesn't have to be defining of it. And it's something that I've taken forward through working with her to working in my own field school. I tell people, if you need a break, take a break. I'm not going to judge you. I've had students, walk away from the field for both, physical reasons, but also, mental health reasons. And I'm okay with that. I want to create an environment where people can enjoy archaeology to its fullest and don't feel like they need to meet or that they feel included and they don't feel like they have to work around, in a way. And I know that's not the right way to phrase it, but, that they feel like there isn't a space for them. There is a space for them. And it's about finding those solutions that Theresa, I think, was so very passionate about finding and experimenting and talking about and reminding people there are ways to include everybody. And I'm sorry, I think I've taken us over the 9 o'clock mark, but thank you for giving me kind of a forum to really talk about all this, because I haven't yet. It's been a lot for me to process.
No, thank you, and thank you for those words, and I don't think anything else really needs to be said after that, so we're going to take a little break for about a minute or so, and when we come back, it'll be Rituals and Roles recaps. Thank you